Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to do an overview of Pipe Creek, the expansion from Flying Pig Games to A Most Fearful Sacrifice, which was my game of the year in 2024. Before we jump in and take a look at the components, what exactly is Pipe Creek? Well, the big word for this expansion is hypothetical. General George Meade was given the command of the Army of the Potomac just 4 days before the historic Battle of Gettysburg. And when he was preparing to fight at Gettysburg, he had two plans in mind. One was to engage the Confederate forces at Gettysburg, but there was also a conditional plan to withdraw to Pipe Creek, about 15 miles to the southeast, and fight the Confederate forces there instead. On the evening of July 1st, 1863, Meade decided to make the stand at Gettysburg, and Pipe Creek's battles never happened. This expansion says, what if Meade decided the alternative and in some way, shape, manner, or form decided to withdraw and engage Confederate forces at Pipe Creek instead of Gettysburg? Let's jump in and take a look at what's inside. So here are the components for Pipe Creek spread out on the table. A Most Fearful Sacrifice, its father, is right behind it. And you do need A Most Fearful Sacrifice in order to be able to play the scenarios in Pipe Creek. Before we jump in and take a look at the individual pieces, let's do a quick overview. Herman Luttman designed A Most Fearful Sacrifice. This expansion is designed by Claude Whalen. Flying Pig Games, of course, is the publisher, and it is a two-player game. However, A Most Fearful Sacrifice is extremely solitaire-friendly, and Pipe Creek looks to be the same. Gameplay length for the 4 scenarios is anywhere from 1 to 6 hours, although I will say these are bigger scenarios here. I think even the shorter one that's listed as an hour, I would suspect it's going to take longer than that to fight out. Historical length is 1 day to one of the scenarios that we'll talk about is considerably shorter, but the other 3 scenarios are the better part of a full day. Just as in A Most Fearful Sacrifice, the turn length is 1 hour per turn, and then the unit scale, of course, is the same, batteries and regiments with 1 strength point equaling roughly 100 men. We'll take a look at the rulebook edition and the scenarios book in a moment, but the biggest notable mechanic difference here is a rewrite of the cavalry rules and the inclusion of a good bit of cavalry in this battle. But the centerpiece here again is these what-if 4 scenarios, and if you know how to play A Most Fearful Sacrifice, it's going to be very easy and fast to pick up Pipe Creek. The rules are 90 to 95% the same. Let's take a look at our rulebook and scenarios book. It's 16 pages. First part is some historical context, then it lists the game components, which we'll be looking through. Then tweaks, modifications, or comments on the rules from A Most Fearful Sacrifice and how they might change a little bit here with Pipe Creek. There's a couple of changes here. Command decision phase has a refinement to the extra preliminary bombardment rule for Union forces. I'm not quite sure whether that's supposed to retroactively apply to A Most Fearful Sacrifice or not. It seems to, but I'm not quite able to parse that out from just what's here. Then key event cards, there's a couple of additional event cards. We'll take a look at those. But the biggest thing here, like for example, movement stays essentially the same. Entrenchments are just slightly modified here. But these 2 pages here are the cavalry movement and combat rules, which are new and supplant those of A Most Fearful Sacrifice. So this would be something to read through before you dig into the scenarios here. Lastly, down here it mentions some optional troops. So you've got Pickett's 2 extra brigades and then some artillery from Nelson's artillery that can also be included in the Most Fearful Sacrifice battles too. Then we dig into the scenarios. Scenario 1 assumes that there's been some fighting at Gettysburg and Meade's forces have withdrawn to the Pipe Creek Middleburg area, and so this first scenario is a 15-turn full-day scenario fought out on the map included in the expansion. Then scenario 2, same rough idea, except Meade's forces have been hit harder at Gettysburg, so this is more of a rearguard action, and this is a 10-turn scenario lasting from 6 in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, fought out on the entire map of the expansion. Then scenario 3 goes the other way and says there was no fighting at all at Gettysburg, and basically is kind of a freeform scenario that says you decide what forces and troops are going to be there from Gettysburg, set up your battle, and go ahead, have at it. So it's a little bit of a loose kind of do what you want kind of scenario, lasting 15 turns on this new expansion map. Lastly, the 4th scenario is about Pickett's charge. It happens on A Most Fearful Sacrifice. It's using the extra units. It basically adds 8,000 troops to Pickett's charge, and you're fighting it on a very small portion of the Most Fearful Sacrifice map. And even though it's a small portion, there are a lot of troops here, Union Confederate forces here. Confederate forces outnumbering, I believe, 3 to 1, which would get them up to a more possible chance for Pickett's charge to have succeeded in that case. So those are the 4 scenarios that are included in this section, and then some game credits and game notes. The expansion comes with 1 counter sheet, again beautifully printed on both sides in the same format and art style as the counters from A Most Fearful Sacrifice. And these are the additional Confederate and Union forces that can either be brought to the optional scenarios or the hypothetical scenarios at Middleburg, or used to kind of create those additional forces for Pickett's charge in A Most Fearful Sacrifice. These are all 13/16 of an inch counters, same size as in the original. Just really, I love the color palette with these in terms of the blue and the tan here to be able to capture the Civil War battles, and they look really good on the maps themselves. So nice counter sheet to fill out all of the scenarios that have been added in Pipe Creek. The expansion also comes with 9 new cards, some division activation cards, and then some new event cards. If you're not familiar with the system used in these games, this is the Black Swan system, which is basically you have a stack of cards you're pulling from to activate certain units throughout the course of a turn, and also to trigger some events that happen in a turn. Before we take a look at the map, there's a couple of player aids to take a look at. These are identical. These are refined in a little bit different layout than the ones from A Most Fearful Sacrifice, if I'm not mistaken. This is a terrain effects chart with the terrain from the new map here on this side, and then all of the combat tables from which basically this looks to me to be very similar to A Most Fearful Sacrifice. You know, combat results table, fire combat, and the different steps that you're working through as you execute combat. Very clear, nice printout, really easy to use. I love the new player aids in A Most Fearful Sacrifice, and these look to be of the same quality here. So nice to have those included with the game. Last, we have our fully mounted 31-inch by 40-inch map. I believe this is the same hex scale, map scale as A Most Fearful Sacrifice, so 200 yards to a hex. And the hex size is 1 1/8 inches across. So with the 13/16 of an inch counter and the counters and the 1 1/8 inch hexes, you know, nice big playing scale to get your fingers in there and move around the counters without getting everything all jammed up. As we look at the geography here, we can see Pipe Creek running down the middle of the battlefield here, and then the town of Middleburg off to the east. This, of course, was in Maryland, just across the Pennsylvania border here. On a historical note, I know this area was chosen by Meade for its defensive capacity to hold the Confederate forces, so could create for a lot of different interesting tactical decisions as you've got the creek in play, the town in play, some of the higher ground over here as you go up from the creek to the town. Looks like it could be a fascinating battle. This is a little bit of a tricky map to evaluate, right? Because we have A Most Fearful Sacrifice, which was done by the map done by Rick Barber, who is kind of like the Shakespeare of maps, you know. So you can have a brilliant and a beautiful map, and then at the same time you almost feel sad saying, well, but it's not a Rick Barber map, and it really is. This is a great map, and yet at the same time I think it is notable it's not a Rick Barber map, you know, that it's hard to compare to the master here. Having said that, this is a beautiful map. It looks functional. There is one thing that I noticed different in, like, A Most Fearful Sacrifice had multiple contour lines if there was a steeper incline on a hill, and I know this one uses the same single contour line. So you're going to need to look around at the difference in altitude to measure whether this inclines here are steeper inclines or just a regular slope incline there. So that is a little bit of a difference in terms of functionality that I noticed between this map and A Most Fearful Sacrifice. But having said that, this is a gorgeous map. It's all mounted nice and thick. And just to take the Most Fearful Sacrifice system, which is so much fun to play, and to have 4 new scenarios to play, I think this is going to be a ton of fun. Now again, they are big scenarios. You know, these 3 full map scenarios are 10 to 15 turns, you know, with a lot of counters. They're going to be bigger scenarios in this collection set. And even the Pickett's Charge one, which happens over 3 turns, 3 hours, it has quite a good concentration of units in there. So that's going to be a fun little hypothetical alteration to Pickett's Charge to fight through. So lots of fun gameplay in this expansion. It's really great to see this battle, you know, these battles in this system being built out. And of course, you know, the next thing up in this series is Rock of Chickamauga coming out. Another Herman Lutman the second full game in this series. So this Black Swan system, just a marvelous system, and it's great to see it coming to life here with Flying Pig Games. Kudos for them for investing the resources to bring this magnificent system to life, and look forward to getting this one to the table. Thanks everybody for watching. Be happy to answer questions as I can. If you did enjoy this video, by the way, you might enjoy our playthrough of the first scenario in A Most Fearful Sacrifice. It's a 4-video series showing how the system works and showing the gameplay. So I've really enjoyed this one. Again, I gave A Most Fearful Sacrifice my Game of the Year award for 2024. So I couldn't be more excited to see more gameplay available in this system.